Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the General Purposes Committee. I'm Councillor James Flanagan, Chair of this committee. We always start with a safety announcement. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and live streamed via the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. And with that, we move on to the agenda. Item number 1, apologies for absence, please.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, any substitute members?
No subs, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippa. Item 3, declarations of interest by members or officers. Do we know of any declarations received so far?
None in advance.
Thank you. And looking around at councillors, any declarations, please? Nope. Sorry, Councillor Ian Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to state that I was on the working group on this particular item. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
So was I.
Thank you. And Councillor Old.
Me too.
Thank you very much. Those are duly noted. Item number 4, public participation. We have one public speaker this evening who will be heard directly before the relevant item. Before we come to that item, item number 5, minutes of the last meeting dated the 15th of July 2024. They're in the agenda packs tonight. Does anybody have any comments or disagreements with the minutes? If not, we can take a vote by general assent. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so item 6, Whitstable Community Governance Review, Stage 2, which is pages 9 to 98 of tonight's agenda. Members will remember that we met here for Stage 1 when we discussed a recommendation which went through to full council at that stage. This is Stage 2. The process will work as per normal. We'll hear from the member of the public first. I'll call them shortly. Then I'll ask Matthew Archer, Head of Corporate Governance, to introduce tonight's report. We'll then move the recommendation, which has come from the working group, and then we'll open it up to debate, followed at the end by a recorded vote as per normal. So with that, can I please ask Chris Stanley to come forward, please? Good evening, Chris. As you know, 3 minutes and your time starts when you're ready. Thank you. I'm so sorry, Chris. We're just going to sort that microphone out for you so you can be heard.
1, 2, 3, testing.
Thank you, Chris. And press the button next to the microphone. That's the one. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you again. Chris Stanley. I'm chair of the Town Council Working Group on the CT5 People's Forum. We're obviously very disappointed with the report. It's not what we'd hoped for. We have really wondered why the leadership of this council is so against the Town Council in Whitstable. The 95% of the areas in England are covered by a parish council or a town council. All the areas around you here, 27 parish councils in the Canterbury district. Many of you will represent wards that have parish councils in. Why can't Whitstable have one? I don't think there's been a good reason given so far. The Community Governance Review says that there's a presumption in favour of a town council, and it has to be the good reasons why not to. I don't think your report has given any good reasons why not to. We complain now, you've read our submission, which is long and detailed. We maintain that the whole process of the timetable was abbreviated. There was poor publicity. I didn't receive any publicity. Many of my neighbours didn't in Ireland Wall receive any publicity. The consultation was very short notice. The first meeting was very poorly attended in Swellcliffe, and certainly they did improve as the word got round. So we maintain that the whole process was poorly delivered by the council. Many people couldn't attend the meetings. They started at 6 o'clock, which is a very bad timing for most people. So the whole process started off very, very badly. We're also very concerned about the participation of councillors, particularly Chris Cornell, who was chair of the working group, the participation and the involvement he had with some of what we call the antis, the people, one particular anonymous group that's got 119 members, and they have been really vicious and unpleasant and nasty at me and many other people, so much so that many of my colleagues on the committee have left because they couldn't stand it any longer. It really has been disgraceful. And Chris helped them. I've got evidence here of emails where he says, yes, I have helped them and I fed them information because that's my role, to spread information. He said to me, there's more than one dog in this race. So he was helping their side. We didn't ask for help. We find that is very wrong, that the chair of a working group should be so involved against the town council. And I have evidence to show of that if you want to see it. The working group didn't take any minutes. We asked for minutes under freedom of information, and no minutes were taken, which we find quite astounding, really, that there's nothing to prove what went on during that meeting and why during that meeting, particularly the one that split Goral into two, which we consider manipulation, if not gerrymandering, to get the result which that working group wanted. So we...
Sorry, could I ask you to sum up your comments, please?
Goodness
Thank
me,
you.
that 3 minutes, I talk too much. We think particularly you should rethink this. The government, the new government, are going to produce a devolution bill. I had a communication from the Chief Executive of the National Association of Local Councils this evening, who said, from what he's heard, there will be changes or are likely to be unitaries. If you have a unitary in East Kent or a mayor in East Kent, you certainly will need town councils. So you really do need to think again about this, reverse this decision, and the whole country will become unitaries or mayors as the new government devolves power. As they said, Angela Rayner said quite clearly, that will happen. And we'll be left without that lower level of democracy in our district. And I think that's something which is very, very regrettable.
Thank you very much. I should say, before I ask Matthew to introduce the report, something I forgot to mention at the start. Forgive me, for those in here tonight at the Guildhall, the screens you can see are not working. So when we come to take the recorded vote, we'll verbally announce the numbers at the end, so everybody's aware and anybody listening in will be able to hear the outcome of the vote as well. I'll now ask Matthew Archer, our Head of Corporate Governance, to introduce the report, please. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the report summarises the Stage 2 responses to the draft recommendations. As the Chair said, you'll recall that at the end of Stage 1, the recommendations of this committee were put to Council and were supported. As we are required to do, we published the draft recommendations. We notified those who had written to us, and we notified our stakeholder list as well, in line with the requirement to inform those who've expressed an interest in the review. We used our usual channels to publicise the recommendations to the wider community, and we received 365 responses in return. And overall, 92% of those, 323, supported the draft recommendations and 8% did not. The main reasons cited were the additional financial cost of the Town Council precept and what was felt to be an unnecessary additional layer of bureaucracy. Those who disagreed with the recommendations felt a Town Council would improve the lives of residents and offer improved local representation through the powers afforded to a Town Council. Based on the results, the advisory group were not minded to make any significant changes to the recommendations in relation to the creation of a Town Council. There was interest in exploring ways that we could strengthen community engagement without necessarily recommending changes to the governance arrangements of the council. I'll come back to that. The report also examines some of the points raised during the consultation. I'll highlight one or two of them for you now. On the presumption in favour, the outcomes of a CGR do not require you to accept the petition proposal or an alternative model. There is provision to carry on with the present arrangements if you believe they best meet the criteria set out in the Act. I should stress that there were no concerns highlighted in the consultation responses about community cohesion on ethnic, religious or cultural grounds. So the question for you tonight is whether you believe that the recommendations before you best reflect the identities and interests of those communities within Whitstable in light of the feedback received from both rounds of consultation and the broader interpretation of cohesion set out in the report. In relation to the consultation, we wrote to every household. So I know it's been mentioned that no publicity was received, but we commissioned Royal Mail to send a letter to every household, which included an explanatory leaflet. That's over and above what is required in law. We decide on the consultation approach, but we decided that actually that was justified in light of the importance of this decision to local residents. And in addition, I've set out in both the previous report and this report all of the other measures, which included the 3 public events, which were attended by about 200 people. We had a YouTube video which summarised the presentation that people could look at. We did lots of publicity on social media. We published frequently asked questions. I think that what we did was responsive to the feedback that we were receiving. And over the 2 rounds of consultation, which lasted 16 weeks in total, we've received over 2,000 responses in total to the review. Everyone has had a chance to have their say, and I believe that you have sufficient information before you to make recommendations to Council. There's comments made about the timetable. I would stress that at this point in time, the review is still live, and the recommendations of this committee will be considered by Council in October. The timetable at the very start of this review set out a 9.5-month programme, and we're still on track to deliver that. I've set out some examples in the report of alternative forms of governance for you to consider and provided some practical examples of how we use these models as part of our existing arrangements. There is a recommendation that the Council should explore how we engage with local groups in the future. That does not necessarily mean changes to governance. Therefore, the suggestion is that they will be dealt with after Council has considered the recommendations of this committee, but not before, because obviously they are the final decision maker. In conclusion, the Stage 2 findings show that the Council's recommendations are supported by most of those who responded. The advisory group's recommendation, therefore, is that the most effective and convenient form of governance, based on the results of both rounds of consultation and taking the criteria into account, is a continuation of the current arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So, as you've heard, the recommendation tonight is to full council from this committee, full council meeting on October the 24th. It's for this committee to decide whether to accept, amend or reject the recommendation. I'm going to go through it point by point for good governance and also for anybody listening in, and then I'll look for a seconder. As per normal, we move this first and then we go to the debate. So the recommendation to Council is 1, based on the findings of the consultation, the Council does not recommend the adoption of a Town Council for the whole of the unparished area of Whitstable, nor does it recommend an alternative boundary for a smaller town council covering Gorrell and Tankerton wards. 2, that a town council does not represent the best interests of the community in light of the A, support by residents for the council's draft recommendations in the second stage consultation, B, the rejection of the proposal by a majority of respondents in the first stage consultation, C, the concerns raised by residents about the additional cost associated with a town council precept, and D, the lack of support for an additional layer of governance. 3, the council will explore the possibility of strengthening community engagement with local groups within the constraints of existing capacity and resources. It does not, however, recommend any formal changes to the existing governance arrangements. And 4, the conclusion of the review, based on the responses to both stages of the consultation, is that the most effective and convenient form of governance is a continuation of the existing arrangements. That's the proposal. Is there a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. So we now open up to debate. Would anybody like to comment on the recommendation? Councillor Ian Stockley. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Matthew for the report. I know it's taken a lot of time and effort to wade your way through this, and I think you've done a very good job. It's plain, in my view, that this proposal for a town council is not supported by the majority of people who have expressed an opinion in Whitstable, and I think that is where we are. Now, I'm a councillor for a non-parished area, and indeed no town council either, so I do understand the feelings of some people may have feelings that a town council would benefit Whitstable and indeed possibly even Herne Bay. But I think it's not supported by the majority of people who responded, so I think we are where we are on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockley. Anybody else looking around? Councillors? Councillor Wheeler.
Contact. Yeah, I'd like to just ask those members of the working group that are here to address some of the concerns raised by Mr. Stanley.
Thank you, Councillor. I've next up Councillor Old, who was on the working group, followed by, and then I'll come to Councillor Stockley again and Councillor Smith. Councillor Old.
Thank you, Chair. I was a member of the working group, and as a Liberal Democrat, and as it's been kindly pointed out in the CT5 comments, as a Lib Dem, Lib Dems have a policy statement that they will devolve power to the lowest practicable level, and I fully support that. Removing barriers to the creation of parish and town councils, that's also something I fully support, and I'm predisposed to that view. However, there's an important subclause to that statement, and the subclause to that statement is in areas that so choose. In areas that so choose. So while I'm a fan of devolving local government to the lowest possible level, I'm a greater fan of democracy. And in this instance, the council consulted widely on a proposal that was chosen and submitted by the CT5 Forum, and it was rejected and met the very high hurdle that the report talks about it needing to meet. And in my view, we should have stopped there. In my view, there was no need to continue to look at the alternative view for Gorrell and Tankerton, although Matthew will point out the reasons for that and the advice he received, and I'm fully prepared to go along with the advice that was received from an external source that we should have gone the extra step of trying to look at that. One of the comments made was that the leadership is opposed to having a parish council. Well, I can't speak for the leadership, but I can speak as a member of the working group. And I can say that on the working group, this was approached fairly, equitably, and both sides of the argument were given a very good airing. there was a good debate. It was said that there's no good reason given for the decision that was reached. Well, there's a very good reason set out in the report. And the good reason given is that the majority of people were overwhelmingly against this proposal. And so I started out from the position of saying I was predisposed to be in favour of this. I was disappointed by the outcome, but I'm willing to go along with the outcome and recognise the fact that the majority of people are not willing to pay additional money for an additional level of representation. I do take the point, however, that if we were to move to a situation where there were unitary authorities, it would be very important to think again. I understand that once a proposal has been submitted and discussed, then there's a period of 3 years, is it, before this can be addressed again. If there were changes into the government's arrangements for this council, then I think we would have to reconsider that and think again. But for now, I would like to associate myself with Councillor Stockley's comments and say thank you to Matthew for preparing a detailed report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. Councillor Stockley, please. Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor.
The floor is
Stockley.
yours.
Thank you. I would also like to thank Matthew for this report. It took quite a lot of hard work to get here and to carefully consider everything that was put before us. Regarding what Mr. Stanley said about not receiving letters, and I know people didn't receive letters, but they also, the CT5 Forum did say that they put 10,000 leaflets out as well. So they all put it on top of that. The Royal Mail has, as we know in the general election, hasn't been performing at its best when it comes to delivering things on time. But if they also delivered 10,000 leaflets, I think it was a good job of raising awareness for people to respond to this. I didn't come across many people who didn't know about it. I did come across a lot of people who couldn't bother to respond, which is a different thing, you know, so, because a lot of people just, it's nothing to do with me, I don't care. But I did have quite a few residents come to me very concerned about having extra money coming out. And these were all pensioners who were really quite terrified about the prospect of having to pay something extra. And they had all responded no to it. When we got the results to me were quite clear. We did start looking at maybe, but then we decided that was moving goalposts. The question was a voice for the Whitstable, for the whole of Whitstable, and it was a no from the people who responded. I do think that the unitary authorities will happen sooner now with a new government if they get their way. I'm guessing that it will be a Labour policy, and I hope it is. I do hope we do have a unitary authority. And I would be really keen to revisit this if there is a unitary authority. Only that's my unitary authority campaign starting now. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to invite Matthew to explain the situation with minutes for working groups. I'm familiar with the reason, but you might like to put it on record. Thank you.
Well, I think with this particular working group, it was a case of analysing the consultation responses that we received, and the slides from the consultation responses have been shared as part of a Freedom of Information request, and that was then used to start forming the report. So the shape of the report really is sort of the evidence of the sort of the growing view of the working group, and that was really how it came to be. So, no, we didn't record the minutes. We instead used the feedback from those sessions to start informing chapters of the report, and that was how we did it.
Thank you, Matthew. Looking around at councillors, anybody else for comments, questions? If not, I'll ask Matthew, do you want to come back on a few of the earlier points, please?
Sorry, yes, just one, which was about the fact that the feedback of residents isn't in the criteria. I would stress that there is, in paragraph 6 of the of section 93, the principal council must take into account any representations received in connection with the review. So what you're doing is you're looking at the criteria. So you've got, does it reflect the identities, of communities and interests of the community in that area? Is it effective and convenient? You've taken into account the arrangements that are already in place, and you're taking into account the representations that you've received in connection with the review. I think I've addressed those within the report, and it's for you to say if you feel that there's any more information that you need. But I just wanted to stress that the representations that you receive is an integral part of the review.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you. I'd just like to ask for clarification. It says number 3, the council will explore the possibility of strengthening community engagement as to what that constitutes.
Well, I think that's to be confirmed. I think we would take this review away and it would be referred to our cabinet member and the cabinet at large to give consideration to that recommendation. So if council agree these recommendations, I mean, that's the final step in this process, mustn't forget that, then that would be a reference at that point to be picked up by our cabinet.
Thank you. Any other councillors? And just to clarify, Matthew, is it 3 years between community governance reviews?
It's every 2 years. Yeah. So at this stage, if for example there is proposals for unitary authorities come down the tracks, we've seen them before, and historically that is you can imagine the complexity of that project. So there would be scope as part of that within the timelines allowed to consider all of the arrangements that follow underneath the unitary authority if we ever reach that point.
Thank you, Matthew. One last chance, looking around at councillors, if anybody wishes to comment. In which case, then, we will move to the vote on the recommendation. Now, just to remind everybody that if you vote for, you're voting for the recommendations as read out. Against is against. Recommendations, abstain, obviously, speaks for itself. We're going to use the voting buttons, and then we'll announce the vote afterwards. Ready to go?
We're going to do a manual vote.
We're actually going to do a manual vote then. Okay,
Because the
right.
system's not working.
So the manual vote will be reading out councillors' names, and then, because we've got trouble with the systems here tonight, then please respond for, against or abstain on the recommendation. Pippa.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Buckman.
For.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor Flanagan.
For.
Councillor Old.
For.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
For.
Councillor Ian Stockley.
For.
Councillor Jeanette Stockley.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
Against.
Thank you. So that's 8 for, 1 against, no abstentions.
Thank you, Pippa. Thank you, councillors. So that means that the recommendation as read out goes through to the full council meeting on October the 24th, and it will be full council to make the final decision at that meeting. That brings to an end item 6. We now move forward to item 7. Any other urgent business to be dealt with in public? I'm not aware of any. Item 8, exclusion of the press and public. I'm not aware of any reasons to do that or any other matters. Thank you. And item 9, any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions of the Local Government Act 72 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000 or both. I'm not aware of any either. Okay, so the time is 7:32. Can I thank our members of the public for attending tonight, our public speaker, our council officers for all your help and support, and yourself, councillors, for attending tonight. Have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.